for user experience, right? And how many of you I want to interact with the audience. Like, what do you think UX is? Yeah.
Oh, it's experience. It's everything. User experience is every aspect of everything. It's everything that goes through our eyeballs and our earballs and our nose.
Okay. Any other different answers? Yeah.
It's the abstraction of systems, complicated things, the easiest experience possible for users. This is coming from an engineer.
Okay. I see. Yeah. Okay. You?
I have no idea about Web3, but what I can understand is the experience that a consumer has using a product.
Okay. Well, I guess everybody has experienced Apple products, right? Like Apple is the representation of good user experience versus Motorola days. Back then when it was like so hard to even like input like a phone number. But I think in the in the tech startup community, I think the definition can be so wide. Like some people think UX is UI, like nice interfaces only, like putting lipstick on a pig, versus some people's understanding like UX could also cross over as a product manager in larger companies. So there's a huge span of definitions, right? So here's just one slide. I think for people who are really in UX, like the professional community, we hate the term UX/UI. It's sort of like architect/interior designer, okay? Because there is a lot of, and it depends on the maturity of the company also, right? In a smaller tech startup, you probably just only have the budget for one role, and you want that person to do everything from your t-shirts to your business card to your front-end programming to everything, right? But in a larger company, this could be like 4 to 5 roles in UX. I know people like my clients who work at Google, like they are only UX researchers. They don't do design, they don't do the interaction part. So, just to paint you the picture of like how diverse it could mean, like especially when you talk to designers, you just need to make sure you're talking to the right person and they have the same definition as you do, right? An analogy is also like, I think UX is sort of like cooking. Like everybody can cook. You guys cook at home, right? But can you cook for a restaurant? That's another level, right? So it's sort of that, that definition. Yep. And and maybe just one more slide. Do you guys know that? Okay, so here's let's say this is the product development process, and you have the UX designer, and some startups hire the graphic designer or think they are UX designers, right? And some people actually have the front end develop also doing UX, right? So it really depends on the company, right? Some companies, they have more resources, then the roles are more specific. But actually within UX, there could be specialization in UX research, information design, like if you're designing like 1,000 pages Marriott website, like that's a lot of information to deal with. And interaction design, like the interactivity of the product as well. So that's the spiel, of what UX is from my point of view.
Awesome, thanks. And thanks for the visual aids as well. Alana, I'd like to hear your take on that. Like, what do you think UX is, or what is UX? I'm sure you don't think it, you know it.
Yeah, I have a bit of a spicy take, but I know that UX is about, maybe I can go back, like all the things on the left, right? But I feel like if you delineate the two too much, you sort of separate what the CX is, like the customer journey. UX is beyond the product these days. It's like the touch point at which your brand reaches the person's eyes. It's the marketing efforts. It's everything on your Instagram. It's so much more than like what's in the product. And maybe I come from this standpoint too, because when I started, working at startups, a lot of my value was being able to wear a lot of hats, having a lot of transferable skills from working digital marketing, from working as a user researcher. So to me, I think it's kind of nice when UX can be married with UI, and I think that happens actually under product design. Often you have designers that not only just do the one thing, but they can also do strategy. They're thinking about roadmaps. They're with the C-suites, creating all the things that need to happen for you to actually come up with the deliverable that ends up being for the UX person. So I guess that's my hot take on that. But to me, UX, if I could like simplify it, it's a feeling. It's like, how does your product feel when it's in the user's hands? Same way with a brand, right? And as much as, you know, UX is a lot of things that you could be telling your user, I think same way a brand is what it is in the user's mind, same with the experience. It's what somebody takes away at the end of it, you know? That's why a lot of people focus on like viral moments now in a lot of these Web3 projects. And that's why people focus so much efforts on relationships. And I think like my internal thing that I like going with nowadays is like user research is a way to build relationships, and it's a cool way to get in touch with your users, not just for your own like A/B testing, but to actually learn more about who's using. And like there's different ways that we can think about these processes that aren't just processes, if that makes sense.
Totally. I like that perspective as well. Okay, so let's narrow the scope a little bit. We'll talk about specifically UX in Web3. So we had a lot of people not involved in Web3, so just a bit of a recap. It's just jargon, but Web 2 is like the iteration of the internet as we know it today. Maybe going back to like Web 1, it was more of like a static experience, just consuming static content on a web page. And Web 2 is the kind of interactive experience that we know today, where you're writing blogs, you're interacting with other people on social media. It's very engaging, and that's kind of where like this user experience really became like a very important thing. Like, how do users interact with your platform? How do they interact with other people through your platform? So that was Web 2, and a problem with Web 2 was, a lot of the, it ended up being kind of dominated by a lot of like monopolies, Facebook, Google, so on. And there's a lot of issues with like, data privacy that you've probably heard about. So like while Web 2 allows like a lot of amazing things, there's also like a dark side to it. So Web 3 is kind of like a new take, trying to take, I think, like the best of both worlds of Web 1 and Web 2, specifically taking this like blockchain technology and some of the philosophies behind that to usher in a new era of the internet if you will, focusing on things like, openness, transparency, privacy, and a big thing is also like ownership. So ownership of like the platform itself, like owning a piece of the internet, if you will. All of this enabled by blockchain. So given that, we'll start with Alana. So given like kind of the new things that Web3 allows us to do, like what kind of new types of experiences does it create for users? What kind of value does this create for users?
Yeah, so I can speak to a specific use case. I'm working on a project called Stapleverse right now, and the key component of Stapleverse is Jeff Staple, who is a OG streetwear designer, came up in like the early 2000s. He's coined as the one who started like sneaker hype. So he dropped these like pigeon dunks in 2005. People caused a riot because they couldn't get enough shoes. And Web3 has allowed us to create our own like token-gated Discord channels where people can actually be in touch with Jeff. He's creating these token-gated in real life events where people can be there and chat with him. And it's funny because this could all be happening in Web 2. Like nothing is stopping you from making an Eventbrite and saying like, hey, let's get these celebrities to go and meet people. But I think Web3 has brought this behavior change where people are more keen to connect with their fans. And I think Web3 comes at a time where, I think the tail end of Web 2 was a lot of these fan economies. There's even DAOs around girls and their simps. There's like all kinds of crazy stuff that's happening right now. So yeah, there's like I forget what it's called, but there's this girl who has her own DAO. That's
Irene
named after
DAO.
her.
That's the one.
Yeah, and to see that is like, go girl, But it's crazy to see that. So it's the relationship building, It's the token gating, relationship building that happens through that. Also, as we all know, like NFTs have blown up, and for those who maybe disagree with it, the one thing that got me on board was that artists are finally getting their flowers. Artists are getting paid, and now there's like this paper trail where they can get paid again and again as this NFT transfers hands. So I think that's pretty cool because before we couldn't do that. And as someone who also makes digital art, it's like anything I put into the world would just disappear once it loses hype. But with NFTs and stuff, there's a way to create like long-term value with something like that.
Cool. Okay, and Elaine, I'd like to hear your take on that. So how does Web3 change UX?
I personally think that the user experience will move across offline, Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. So a solid example would be, for example, previously we worked on a company where they actually sell eyewear, but see, like eyewear on Web 2 is great for you to search styles, right? Like 1,000 or 10,000 styles. You can't possibly do that offline. Like no salesperson is gonna cater to you, right? But to actually buy the eyewear, you need to actually wear it, you know? Like you can't just totally buy it online through e-commerce, right? Unless they have a really good return policy and that you can kind of try it on and send it back, right? But actually Web3 might be, hey, VR, like you can map your face on the glasses, right? Or it can take big data, can take all your measurements already so that it's accurate, you know, to fit your face. So I actually think it's not like metaverse is like this one thing that it's disconnected with the rest of the real world. I actually think that the user experience is gonna move across, you know, offline, like online e-commerce, Web 2 and Web 3, depends on when it makes sense. Yeah, because I actually don't believe that people will be living in Oculus, you know, and just going to the washroom every day. Like our life will still be connected to the physical world, right? So there are certain things that Web3 is going to be good at, right? Like Alana said, you know, having a community, and you can now there's no more middlemen. Like you can, you know, interact with the celebrity or the artist like directly and get raise funding and get support, right, for your DAO. So I think it's gonna be more like that. You know how like it used to be like for Web 2, people were like, nobody's gonna want any more paper. Like there's no, you don't remember those days, right? And people like freak out about like, oh, there's not gonna be radio anymore, right? But the reality is it still exists, right? It's just a matter of proportion. Yeah, that's my take.
Can you pull up that slide that has like the was it like UX violation of the UX design principles? I think it's very interesting. Yeah, so maybe can you just like talk about this? I think this is a really interesting take on like Web3 and UX.
Yeah, so I actually had a bunch of interns last year and we really dived into like NFTs and Web3 stuff. And I myself, I invested in crypto back in 2017. I knew about it in 2015, but I didn't know what it was. So I made some mistakes, like lost money on exchanges and, you know, like I invested in BitConnect and, you know, oh. So I learned my mistakes, right? So now that I learned my mistakes, like I know, like why are we having FTX like Sega, right? I think one of the biggest reasons is because it's so freaking hard to use. It's so freaking hard to even buy crypto right now, right? Like you need all this knowledge. You know, like you need to know why we're doing this, like which crypto to buy, like what wallet to download, like which exchange, like which ATM, like Bitcoin ATM. So because Web3 kind of is a paradigm shift, right? Like you are your own bank. Like that is such a foreign concept. Right? For most people, they take, I think 90% of this world is like take the least path of resistance. That's UX principle number 1, right? Because I know programmers can read a Java book from beginning to end like in half an hour, but most of us, like human beings, can't bother. And yeah, so that's why people will rely on the third parties, right? They rely on the exchanges because it's much easier. I have friends who buy crypto on Wealthsimple and they thought they bought crypto. I'm like, you didn't, right? Like not Robinhood, not PayPal, you don't own it, right? You kind of gave your power away, but people actually don't know that. So that's one. Oh, do you guys know about what you see is what you get, WYSIWYG? That's UX, another UX principle. What that means is, okay, like my mom, she would read the newspaper and she thinks like Bitcoin is a gold coin because that's what's on the media all the time, right? You always see a Bitcoin like in a gold coin, right? But it's not, right? It's actually digital money, decentralized. So this whole concept of not your keys, not your coin, is just way too hard. Like to be able to do that, you need to know how to put your crypto in a hardware wallet and write your 12 seed phrases on an A4 sheet of paper. And where do you store that? Like, it's just way too hard right now. And then one particular thing about Web3 is irreversible. Oh my God, irreversible. But humans make mistakes. So it's completely violating the UX principles. Of course, there could be ways to prevent that. But I know a lot of people lose their money, right? Like they send, and people sometimes don't look at instructions, right? The more words there are, they just glance over and they press enter, and oops, it's gone, right? And okay, I have a programmer brother, so I know about these things because of him. So code is law, right, for programmers here? But honestly, humans trust people and not math or algorithms. So that's another challenge. And also the first time I bought Bitcoin, I'm like, where did my money go? Like, it never arrived my wallet until 15 minutes later. So I freaked out, right? And human attention span is less than a goldfish. It's like 8 seconds. So if you require the user to wait, like even 1 minute, it's like way too long right now. Like people just don't have the patience, especially is TikTok culture now, right? And then the last two is all these tech jargons. Like if you have a pitch deck full of these blockchain, NFT, crypto, metaverse, so every other word needs a glossary, then your investors are not gonna get what the hell you're doing, right? And lastly, in UX, we design for people and we design for trust. And on the left side, like with Mt. Gox and Terra Luna and FTX, like there's not a lot of trust that's been built, right? So I think we're still in the DOS era of crypto. We're waiting for the Macintosh to appear. Yeah, that's my speak.
Yeah, I thought it was super interesting to see this list because like it is kind of true. Like you wonder what is like really hindering mainstream crypto adoption, and I think it's a lot of these things that like these are like probably features, not bugs, most of them, but still they go against a lot of like UX principles. Maybe Alana, do you have any like comments on this in particular? Like maybe how we can kind of overcome these issues and how through like good UX we can like actually like break crypto into the mainstream?
Yeah, I would say that when you actually interact with a Web3 product, the good Web3 products abstract all of this. They're not telling you, they're not showing the blockchain validation time. They're not showing you the scams. They're not, maybe they'll say you are your own bank, but that's not the main value prop of the good products that I've used. So for example, I think something that really speaks to these and actually goes against one of the UX principles, the path of resistance one, and something that I like to use actually is tactful friction. So knowing when and where to add friction to the user journey so that people slow down. And people actually understand, oh, I'm doing something that is gonna be irreversible. I'm sending like $50,000 to a wallet that maybe has an error and it's not gonna go back to the wallet I want it to. So, and a way to deal with those things is like simple UX, other things like modals, breadcrumbs, tooltips, like just things that frame in context what is even going on and why you should stop and actually look at the transaction that you're doing. So yeah, for me, the things that help is friction and framing in context. So framing in context, an example would be, you talked about how buying crypto is like impossible. I'm gonna show an app that I love to use called Newton later on, but they really, like within your wallet, you can see the balance from like Canadian dollars to Bitcoin. You can use something that looks like Uniswap or some sort of like trading platform right in there in a column. It'll show the pending transactions that you have, and like just the words pending really does a lot for people who are like, where is my money? Why is it not showing? Because when things are decentralized, you're not gonna have all the info in one place. You're gonna have to look other places, and I agree that Etherscan is like terrible. I never go on there. I would not understand it. But by just having like a tab that's like pending transaction, that's something that's so simple, but it really lets people understand like why they're waiting. I think as long as you explain, it can help. And I think that mass adoption of Web3 will ultimately not be about the technology, but what the technology can foster in terms of the end user value. It's more of a vehicle.
Very inspiring. Thank you. Okay, so how do you define good UX? We'll start with Elaine, and you've got like some UX principles there, but yeah, maybe if you have like a slide to pull up or something, yeah, like what are some key points in like defining what is good UX versus bad?
Traditionally, when we say what a good product is it useful? Is it usable? Is it desirable? Right? Like, you can make a beautiful site, but it could be entirely unusable, right? Or it could be usable, but it's not a useful product, right? So having those three components will be integral to having a good product and user experience. And then the visual aspect of the emotion part, I think it's in the desirable space, right? And honestly, sometimes different designers have strengths in different of these. So a good visual designer might be more in the desirable part, and then usability, or people, design is coming from the psychology background sometimes, right? And then usefulness could be more on the business and strategy side of things. So just having that differentiation might help you guys to identify what kind of designers you're hiring. Yeah. And then the hard thing about UX is because most people just see the tip of the iceberg, the interface, right? Like the app interface or the website interface, but you don't realize like all this work that goes on behind the scenes, like, you know, doing user research, which is more like customer discovery, like interviewing users, like, you know, coming up with personas, coming up with the whole flow of the whole application. And then it's like the last phase is you see what it looks like, right? So people just sometimes don't know all this stuff that goes on behind the scenes, right? So if you're a tech startup and you go ask your designer, hey, whip out like 2 screens for me like tomorrow, then the designer will be like, well, but who are we designing this for, right? Like, I don't even know how, like, I need to talk to them. I need to understand how they currently use things and what are your competitors, like all this stuff, way before they even come up with a beautiful interface, right? So I think, you know, maybe that will help a little bit defining.
Yeah, perfect. So, okay, that's your take on good UX. And then Alana's actually going to walk us through a few examples of what she believes good UX to look like. So you can take it away.
All right. So I'm going to toot Future Primitive's horn right now and start with a project that we did for NFT NYC. And we basically created a token-gated scavenger hunt where people would run around New York City, find NFTs by going to local businesses and fueling the local economy, and then they would get entered into other more valuable NFT raffles. The reason why I think this is a good experience is because this isn't just the product. We had to run around the city putting up like the stickers for people to actually validate they were at locations. We made brochures. There's a lot that went into this other than the product. So I'll just start by playing this video because this gives a pretty good overview of what this looks like.
Order yourself an Americano and then take a selfie sipping coffee. All right, let's do this. Use photo. All right, finished. Completed. Cool.
All right, so Jeff was going through this mobile experience, which I can pull up here, where, okay, so essentially what this is this is based on an idea from our first NFT drop, where we dropped a bunch of feed items that were related to what a pigeon would eat in New York City. And they were tied to locations. And this was during a time where we didn't want to be another like Bored Ape Yacht Club. We were like, we want to do something different. So we injected the metadata of locations into all these different NFTs, which I can pull up the map here. So this is something that a community member made, which is sick. They just plotted everything there. So when you go, we go in this experience here, you can see like what you can win. You can level up and qualify for rewards. There's like these featured locations. And then you can look at the map. So let's say I wanted to go to one of these. This is gonna work here just because it can tell how far you are. So you need to be, within 250 feet to claim this actual thing. But the idea here was really cool. It was successful. We have a leaderboard that I can show you here. It was just really interesting to see people run around the city, collect these NFTs. I have examples of what it looked like when we were around the city, just posting all these stickers. It was a really cool like way to bridge, I guess, the URL and IRL. When we first started the event, we also got people to meet in front of a cafe. So to me, this also fits into the UX because you're getting people to meet, you're getting that social interaction going, and then we're also just explaining this stuff. Sometimes you need to be there to explain. And I think sometimes things in UX, when you're first starting, when you're early stage, you need to do things that are unscalable. And this was really fun. It was not scalable, it was really fun. And we also made these brochures just as like a non-tech product way to help people along the UX journey of like, how do they actually qualify for rewards and how do they actually earn all of these things? So here's another picture of somebody just going in, scanning. This is another video of somebody just completing it on their phone. It's really cool to be able to like be there with people and watch them do it. And I wanted to also share some feedback that we got. It was really nice to actually get survey results that confirmed what we were thinking, that this was actually a good experience and people enjoyed it. My favorite comment here is that someone said that I was super stoned and was able to figure out what I was supposed to be doing, which is amazing. That's like the best feedback I've ever gotten. So moving on to the next example, which feeds into sort of what I was saying to some of your UX principles and Web3 things. So this is Newton. It's a wallet. It also has exchange utilities in here, but essentially when I log in, I can immediately just like see what I hold in Canadian dollars. I can easily see the market. I can see my recent activity, and I used to use Binance a lot, and I know Binance updated their website recently, but when I would log in, I would not see this stuff presented in a way that actually doesn't give me a headache. But my favorite part about this experience is that here, there's only 3 things that you really do. Of course, there's more things within them, but you can add funds, trade, and withdraw. I'll start with withdraw because I think this is just magical. So you can withdraw straight to Interact eTransfer, and it'll like send you an email and it'll tell you what the password is. So this is just, I think this is incredibly user-friendly because it connects back to a Web2 thing that we use. And to me, it instills feelings of trust because I know that I can trust the Interact eTransfer. Another thing here that's really helpful that I mentioned earlier was pending transfers. So if I have anything that, let's say I was cheap and then I paid really low gas for the thing to process and it just was taking a long time, it would show up here. And then it also has, if the thing is not completing, I can click it and it'll take you straight to a chat, which to me is really cool that they actually keep everything in app so that you never actually bounce from the product to figure out what your needs are, versus others might just push you to Etherscan and etc. What else is here? Add funds, e-transfer, crypto from wallet, and then they just have like a very easy, like I can just trade whatever I want immediately You know, there's a lot of little micro copy here that gives me an idea of whether I should wait. And I just think as a whole, this product is a lot better than what I've seen in the beginnings of all the DeFi things. The last thing that I want to show here is KPRverse. So this is more of a brand design perspective than strict UX, but this is sort of what I was talking about with, you know, to me, when a company or a brand has an all-encompassing presence, and you can see it through motion design, like visual design, also how they structure their information, I think it's really powerful. So I'm just gonna reload this. Like, this site just brings all the vibes for me. And, you know, Web3 to me is all about personality and like, what is the story that this site is telling? I just think from a brand perspective, this is really strong. And it uses a lot of like novel interactions from the web, you know, different types of parallaxes, different types of masking. And I love the typography, so yeah, those are my examples.
Cool. What do we think? Is that cool or what? Yeah, that's sweet. Okay, so that's some examples of good UX. So now you know. Okay, so I think kind of the last thing we'll touch upon before we go into like a little interactive Q&A. One more time, can the people involved in like UX or design raise their hands? I feel like there was more of you last time. I don't know what happened. Change your minds after the presentation. Okay, starting with Elaine, for the designers and UX folks here, how can they make themselves more attractive to Web3 companies?
Yeah, I think right now, Web3 companies, especially if you need to raise funding, like your pitch deck needs to really communicate the value, like for the users or customers, right? So dwelling in jargons definitely doesn't help, because you might only have like, the elevator speech to pitch, right? So if the designer can actually, you know, take that perspective instead of just like, making things pretty and speak business, right? Like how can you help the startup raise funding and also garner more users to adopt the platform or adopt the product, then that's really good evidence for the investor, right? Because the only reason why the investor will want to invest in you is because your site or your app has traction, and that's user traction, right? So otherwise, there's no proof, right? Like what value are you bringing to, or what kind of problem are you really solving, instead of just like putting a lot of Web3 jargons into the pitch deck, right? Which kind of happened in Web2, right? You know, anything that was .com got funded and then it busted afterwards. And I think we're experiencing this right now. You know, we're at the trench of disillusionment that I have in one of the diagrams. Yeah, so I think, you know, design is being able to also speak business and also look from the value creation point of view and not just making things pretty. Yeah.
Value creation for the business or for the user?
End user and business, yeah.
Basically, let's imagine that I'm applying for a job for the Web3 product. So do I have to talk with those Web3 jargons to the business owner, or like, do I not have to talk to the users with those jargons?
Well, it depends on what who is your product for, right? If it's for mass market, then you might not be able to use all these tech jargons. Otherwise, they won't really get what your site is about, like, or your app is about. So one of the key things about UX, I think it's called UX because you involve users in your process. Like, I personally think if you don't involve users in your process, you're just doing web design, or you're just graphic design, right? Like in our UX process, we actually, like when we work with companies like Google or Meta, we involve users, right? Like from day one. We will recruit users, the right target users. We'll have a mock-up. It could be a PDF, right? It doesn't have to be coded. But way early, we already test concepts. Very, very early, like way before you do programming. We'll save you a lot of time because once you code, Oh my God. Like, I have had tech startups where they raise funding, they code it for a year, launch the site or launch the app, and then nobody signed up. Yeah, they spent $1 million, right? And then nobody signed up. So what are you going to do then? Like, if you then tell the programming team, hey, people don't want these features and we got to change it, then you're twisting their arm, right? And nobody wants to do that, right? So it's better to test early and often. So it's kind of like real estate, right? Like before you buy a $1 million home, you do a little demo home, right? It's fake, but it feels real, right? That's what we do, like in UX prototypes. We make it so real that people are willing to put down the money, or the investors are so inspired. Have you heard of even like this lady? She created the Lululemon mirror. She's not a tech founder. She raised all this funds without making the product like actually functional yet. And it's possible, right? And that's where I think UX, the right UX people can help you by saving a lot of money instead of coding, like, but project the vision. Like, what are you solving? What's the end value for your end users? That's what I think is what's going to get you funded. Not building it all out and then figuring out it's not working for users in the end, right? So that's my take.
Okay. So Alana, you are a designer working in Web3. So I guess like same question to you. Like what advice do you have for other UX designers here in the room or elsewhere, like for breaking into the industry?
So when I first started, I was getting rejected left, right, center. Like, it was really tough. That's kind of why I fell into freelancing, is because I would not be accepted by any of these corporations. I don't know if I didn't have the papers or whatnot. But in my self-discovery process, I realized that I wanted to be hired not for what I make, but how I think. And I think that's how you can differentiate yourself in the industry when it's super saturated, is like nobody is gonna think exactly like you and connect the dots exactly like you. And I was recently in this like special Web3 cohort called Kernel. It's kind of woo-woo, but it's like a bunch of these really talented people from all over the world that are like engineers from Google, all the way from like Reiki practitioners, and they get together and they talk about ideas and philosophies. And something that they talked about in there was applied poetics. Like, you know that moment when you're in a flow state and you're creating so graciously and everything is just connecting, and you build an entire prototype in a day, and then that's what you show people and they love it. Like, I think being able to be hired for that is a really cool thing to happen. And for all the designers here, you've probably seen the double diamond of design. So it's two things. It's designing the right thing and then designing the thing right. If you can show people that you know what is going on with the user, you feel their pain, you can speak to their pain, you can speak to their empathy, I think that's gonna get you really far, because at the end of the day, like, time management is pain management. Everybody's building products because other people are lonely, tired, they don't want to deal with spreadsheets. Like, there's an underlying reason, and I think if you can show that, and that comes out of like everything that you design, every way that you pitch, every way that you can advocate for stakeholders, I think that's a really strong thing. And if anyone wants to get into freelancing, I would say follow your craft. So like, whatever your craft is, if you like sewing, if you like working on cars, if you like drawing weird pictures, it doesn't matter. Like, all of that craft, I think, fundamentally applies to how you approach creativity and how you'll come up with a different web design or whatever it is. I think that design is not just being in the books and thinking about, you know, UX in just what UX has been taught, but in also being able to stretch and touch other industries and bring it back to what you're creating in the product.
You guys taking notes? That's good stuff. Maybe before we go to Q&A, can we like flip it? So that was what can designers do to make themselves more attractive to companies? So maybe starting with you, Alana, what can companies do to make themselves more attractive to, or help them hire like the correct UX talent?
I guess it depends what kind of talent you're looking for. I'm a part of the generation where we want to disrupt systems, so I'm not going to work at a company that is actively contributing to inequities in society and stuff like that. So I think a lot of people in general care about value alignment. So what are your values as a company? How are you serving an actual need? Because sometimes companies just have like tech fetishism and they got this new shiny toy, they want it out there, they just want to make money. And as a designer, you can tell, and as a user, you can tell. And I don't want to use products like that. So I think, I'm selfish. I'm going to work for things that I want to work at. I don't believe in working at jobs that kill your soul over time. So values is one thing. I think also you can be design-centric. I think that's a term that I've seen thrown around. So there's some companies that really value design. You'll have a seat at the table in terms of strategy and everything. I've definitely worked at jobs where I only made the prototypes, but my prototype was the roadmap. It was the thing they would take to trade shows. It was the thing that synthesized the CEO's ideas, right? But they never let me actually influence the business model, even though I thought that I knew better because I was talking to the users every day. So there's a difference between companies that do that and companies that will actually value UX. And then of course, salary, benefits, paid leave, all of that.
If anyone is working in a job that like literally kills your soul, just like please do everything you can to get out of it. Like I'm pretty passionate about that, just as an aside. So if your soul is being killed, like do something about it. Okay, so Elaine, same question to you. Like how can these companies retain this UX talent? I think you had like a statistic we were talking about before.
Yeah. Actually, first of all, I think the right UX designers are actually the glue between business marketing and the tech, right? Because usually, like without UX, what usually happens is the business and marketing people like talk to customers, come up with a feature list on Excel, and then like throws it to like tech people, right? And then, but between the needs and requirements and what actually comes out of it, like there's this whole missing hole in the middle, right? So that's what UX people kind of fill. Otherwise, like it will be completely off, right? And then what happens usually is the tech team builds it up, and then the business guys are like, what? Like I didn't actually mean that, right? And then you'll be pulling your hairs right afterwards. So back to your question about like how can tech startups be more attractive, right, to UX designers? Yeah, I definitely agree with Alana. Like valuing design like Steve Jobs does, right? Giving them a seat on the table to be more strategic and not just putting lipstick on a pig. And also, and also I think maybe tech startups can also experiment with some of the, qualities of Web3. Maybe streaming payments, or can designers own part of the design, NFT it, or get paid in crypto, right? Have equity in the company. Like even if it's just a few percent, right? Like it's like Airbnb, right? Airbnb had 2 design co-founders that really made Airbnb what it is today. His design was a huge part of that company, right? And I think nowadays, there's just a lot of tech companies who don't know what the role of UX is enough to put them at a seat in the table. And part of it also has to do with the design education. The education system is not churning out enough qualified people with a lot of experience yet. Like the statistic that I was mentioning was, I think right now in the US, 70% of the market are junior designers. And a lot of people have just gone through like a boot camp like for 3 months, right? So it's like you only learn cooking for 3 months and then you come out and open a restaurant sort of situation. So I've been in the industry for 26 years, so I'm like the 1%. So I've seen what's going on in this industry. I'm also helping train train designers. And so right now I'm offering what I call fractional CXO. So fractional and chief experience officer. So if your company has a CTO, has a CEO, has a CMO, no UX, most likely what is gonna happen is you find a very junior designer, and then the designer will leave in 3 months because he or she has nobody to learn from in your company that knows our industry, right? And that's where we can step in, where we'll train the CEO, CTO about how to do UX right, and also we'll train up interns to actually allow them an opportunity to create a portfolio piece that's with a real client. So we Yeah, that's how we're trying to bridge the gap right now. Because there's a huge demand for UX designers right now. Like you can go on LinkedIn and every single job for UX right now is a senior designer. JP Morgan is hiring 100 senior UX people. And how do you compete with that as a tech startup, right? So there needs to be more training in the industry, and also a lot more companies giving opportunities to new people for internships and let them kind of improve the craft.
Awesome. Okay, can I get a big round of applause for Elaine and Alana? Thank you. Okay, does anybody have any questions for the lovely Yes V?
Two things. One, thank you so much, guys. This was amazing. Recently, we actually brought on a new advisor for our company. He founded the design team at Spotify. So since he's come on as advisor, he's transformed everything. We've had some amazing growth spurts. Like he transformed our UX, and then we did another launch, and we had onboard in a single week with 4,000 users.
Wow.
It was months ago. But yeah, now I'm starting to understand as like a technical person, like the importance of UX. So really cool to be here. But the second thing was actually something you guys touched on. That was in wallets and its connection to UX. So as you guys know, like you guys talked about it, like dealing with digital wallets with Web3 is like very painful. Like even as a technical person, like I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do sometimes. And a company that's done a really good job at digital wallets is Adaptive Labs. They've done a really like the user experience of Adaptive Labs has been amazing. But but on the same token, like to use my digital wallet, I have to sign in with Google, and then I have to go through Adaptive Labs, and it becomes all centralized. It almost like defeats the whole purpose of like Web3, I find. And it's like, and it goes back to that first UX principle, which is what you guys talked about, and that's path of least resistance. But when you make that choice of path of least resistance, you're fundamentally making a trade-off of all the benefits that Christian we talked about with transparency and privacy for data. How do you think, what's the role of UX going to be being a bastion, maintaining really what Web3 is about moving forward? Because like when I think about good UX, it comes with those trade-offs. I love new products, but it comes with expense of you have all the data. So what's the role of like UX people or UX like, designers in their role of like trying to protect what Web3 is about?
I think before Apple came out, people did not think technology could be user-friendly and beautiful at the same time, right? I think we're at the stage right now. We think we need to trade off like, privacy, security, and good user experience. I think we're in the DOS era right now in crypto. And part of the reason is because a lot of tech founders don't know how to use UX people. They don't know how to include this role in their company. And there are also not enough qualified people also, I think. Yeah, but maybe you hire Steve Jobs in your company and that's gonna change everything, right? And I think we're waiting for the Macintosh to come out. And between Web 2 and Web 3, I think the analogy is sort of like a gasoline car versus an electric car. The user interface it's still the steering wheel, right? But the whole fundamental back end of the whole technology has changed. So I think that is probably gonna be where we're going. Like there's a bit of paradigm shift, but I think people still need some analogy from Web 2, like how the desktop, desktop computers actually took off because of the trash can and the file folder, Like people need some kind of relevance to what they know before, right? And of course, in the early days, we had AOL, that made it dumbed down internet. And then eventually people kind of learned, and then we didn't have to use AOL anymore, right? But remember those days when Web 2 was called cyberspace and information highway, like the super information highway, and then the web addresses were 191.25.63. Remember those days? I think it's going to evolve, right? Yeah, it's just that we're not there yet, because right now it's like building the highways, like it's the infrastructure guys, and then we're not ready yet. And then the next phase is going to be user experience, I think.
So my answer to that would be less about the technology and more about the people, because people are at the end of everything that we use. If you're talking about, keeping true to Web3 philosophies, what is that? Open source, decentralization, rallying against Facebook and all these companies that steal our data. So I sort of see our role as designers, because not only are we designing things and products, but we're designing for human behavior. Before all these apps and stuff, we were just using mail or walking to our friend's house and all of this, right? So if we are opening the floodgates to new novel interaction patterns, what are patterns that will foster more decentralized thinking? So is it that if you had a blogging platform, everything that's there, everybody that contributes to a platform should have like an NFT stake in that platform so they can make money from it so that everyone has their ideas rewarded or something like that? Or that your company is full of devs and you want to open source like all of your tech at the end of the day. I think for me it's more of like a mindset and attitude thing. And I think there's always going to be trade-offs too with greasing the funnel, making it as greasy as you can to push users in there, but you might have to choose between that or adding friction depending on what fundamentally you want users to feel at the end of the experience.
Yeah, we all can all hear that, right? I'm not crazy.
I hear the alarm.
So I'm a UX researcher, and I was especially the slide that you showed about the UX principles and also the Web3. So how you were like showing that in the chart. So I believe I agree that like from all the changes that Apple, especially like with Johnson and everything that brought to design, everything's been more usable and like more user friendly and more attractive and everything. However, there is this controversial topic the fast design, like to in terms of like comprehension, like the fewer information that you share with the users, then you're kind of hiding some part of the like fundamentals or like the structure behind something which is very complicated. And there is like this huge complication, but you're just showing them a beautiful button that they just click on it. And so this ends up to like to this part that we are seeing this fast design, which is like when that we came to Web3 and like when people they want to work with software or like a platform which is way complicated. And which is more complicated, and they have to focus. They have to like, it's like 2 minutes, because you also showed us, I know that's like, in 5 seconds, you have to take their attention, otherwise you've lost them. So, and I'm worse. I'm like maybe 1 second by myself. And I think this fast design has changed us consciously. So, how do you think like the UX principles could change in a way that, because like crypto and all of these concepts are kind of complicated, and it takes a while, like for myself, to go and read a lot of things and like watch videos, and still don't know what exactly that is. So, how do you think we can like with fast design versus slow design for like more complications that are coming into Web3? How do you think like UX principles and also design, like both of them, can kind of compromise both like the usability, attractiveness, and what do you think we can tweak and what should we change? If you want to change something, what do you think about that?
When you say fast and slow design, do you mean like people don't have patience?
So yeah, like with slow design is like the whole principle. I don't remember the principles right off the top of my head, but it's like when you're more conscious that you want your customers to take more time, like
I actually don't think you can change human behavior that way because our lives don't revolve around technology. The product technology should revolve around us, I believe. Because like you don't just use crypto all day. You have a family, you have kids, right? You have a life to live, right? You want to go to the park, you want like so it's only a small part of your life. So if you demand people to read the whole menu, sorry?
I was gonna say the traders in the house, the degens probably.
No, what I mean, small part of your life meaning people are not gonna dump a lot of time to learn all the complicated stuff, right? People want to drive a car from A to B. They don't want to open the hood and like study the manual and learn about all that because that's not the benefit, right? I think, well, crypto will be big in people's lives, but I'm just saying right now there's a huge bottleneck because we're opening the car hood and expecting people to learn all the inside of the technology, right? Which people don't really care, right? They care about what we can do with the technology or the benefit of it, I think. So I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's a progression. Remember, like back in the 1900s when the first cars came out, like you had two people drive the car. One person has to go in front of the car, wave a red flag so that nobody gets killed, right? And go in front of the car and do like, that's what the car came out in the beginning, right? And look how the car developed. So I'm confident that we're gonna get there. It's just that we're in the very, very early days right now. Yeah.
I would say that I think our lives do revolve around technology. Unfortunately, I don't like it either, but I think it does. I'm constantly checking my phone. We have all the stats about 13-year-old girls being depressed because of their Instagrams. It's just a reality, and so it's like, how do we adapt? And I think that, like what I mentioned earlier with friction and framing things in context. So framing in context is probably the more relevant one here. You don't have to show everything at once. Like when I'm going through a crypto transaction, I'm open my MetaMask, I see my balance, and I can send. That's it. And then, if I want to receive things, I can go somewhere else. So you're sort of like chunking out the different UX goals you have for the user. I think it's also helpful to think about what they're trying to do, where they're being onboarded. The onboarding is a really important thing. And I think with adding friction, adding a modal that says, are you sure you want to do this transaction? It does allow people to slow down. And I think maybe not a UX principle, but a principle in design is you can take from other things, you can take from having a queue in front of a fast food joint. What is it like to embody having a line for your product? Does it make it more enticing for people to use it? Dating apps nowadays, you run out of swipes at some point. Does that make you value the swipes you have more? You can use ways to sort of pace people in their interactions. You can also limit what people are seeing. And so I think that depending on how radical you want to be on like dealing with behavior change, I do think that it's possible. And I think that we need more of that. We need less interaction. We need less slipping down funnels, like when you were talking about the quickness of, I guess, products nowadays, I thought about like the one-click shop. And I think about how Amazon released their like voice tech and kids started ordering random toys from their parents' like Amazon speakers because they would just talk to it and then they just order it. And it's like, do we need more consumption culture? I think that's the bigger thing that design professionals can actually deal with. And of course, you might get yelled at by your boss if they just want to make more money, but you can make it your own like personal philosophy to be like, no, I'm gonna think about how I wanna actually slow people down. But I do think it's possible.
Well, like MetaMask, do most of you know what it is? I mean, honestly, wallet. I think right now there's only 3.9% of the world's population in crypto, right? I think most like non-tech people, they're like, a wallet on a browser? What? Like it's weird, okay? And having to switch the chains and thousands of coins, it's just very weird for most normal people, I would say. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
Do you think, like, if you want to make this product appealing to
I can speak to this a bit. Before I was working in Web3, I worked at 2 startups. One of them was smart homes for aging in place, and the other one was a consumer SaaS product for healthy brain aging. So I was doing user interviews with older folks. Our target demographic was like old folks' homes. So this is something that we got into a lot. And something that I noticed was there's usually a human in the loop somewhere. So usually with a product, you know, there might be a human in the loop for helping with troubleshooting or something like that. But interestingly enough, the human in the loop could be who your actual customer is, where your end user is the older person. So for example, there's this company in Vancouver called Tuk2. My roommate actually works there. They're a startup that provides like home care service, groceries, like all kinds of like awesome services for old people that may not have you know, the family resources and stuff. And their model is actually to sell to the adult children of these seniors rather than the seniors themselves. So there's interesting things like that where you're actually speaking to a person who is the proxy for that value rather than trying to like get this senior to use their tablet and interact with this app. So it could be stuff like that, or targeting outside of the product. So using the product is one thing, but what if your onboarding was weekly seminars at a community center where people came in and you actually taught them how to learn something? Again, it's maybe not scalable, but for early stage, that might be how you get people to cross the chasm and actually become your early adopters. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that you need to first identify who is your main target audience, because you can't kind of design one thing for everyone sometimes. Like, for example, older people, like, for example, my mom is like, you don't look at the newspaper. I'm like, I look at the news, but I don't look at the newspaper, right? You know, I do go online, but it's not in her world, you know what I mean? So definitely, like, for younger generation, like, they're much more tech savvy and they're on their phones all day long. But for, you know, older people, it's a completely different, you know, you might need human beings interacting with them. Like my dad told me, hey, don't deposit your check in the ATM. It's not safe, right? So it's impossible to design for like everyone, right? So you need to make sure who you're designing for, and which is like maybe the largest pool of people that you should be focusing on, I think, yeah.
Hi, I have a question kind of based off what you were speaking on. So when you're deciding your target demographic, like how specific are you normally? And then what if you decide like, well, it could work with this people, this people, this people, and then it kind of like generalizes too much? You try to be
We usually call finding extreme users. Yeah, so what product do you design? Okay. What we usually do is like for example, the tech startups that I help, sometimes we have a hypothesis first, right? We hypothesize these are the target users, so we might recruit like 8, 12, 20 people, depending on how complex your project is. And then we'll find edge cases. We'll find extreme users so that we can, it's like feeling the edge of the room kind of thing. And then once you talk to enough people, like maybe a 3 or 4 in that category, you see a pattern. It's either a clear yes or a no sometimes. Yeah, and then that way you can, maybe the second round you can be much more specific. So it's really like being a detective. You know, let's say I want to identify who's the murderer. So you need to interview all these people around the case, and then eventually you kind of figure out that, no, these are not the people, these are the people, so let's go deeper on that side. Like, I actually find that to be a useful analogy, yeah.
So you said you were working in the metaverse space?
like literally, I always assume that our demographic is like 20-year-old growth, but I'm sure like there's more than that that are into Web3 and metaverse. But then if
Yeah.
I like go outside of that range, then I think what if I would water down our experience because the bulk of the community kind of falls into that category.
So what kind of metaverses?
Well, at the moment, we're building something that is like a kind of a metaverse experience that is based off of an NFT collection and a movie. And I think that we wrote down on a piece of paper that our target demographic would be like someone in their pursuing a career in a creative field. Like I tried to be super specific.
Yeah. So would they use the metaverse, or would they have an opportunity to work for, and you provide digital jobs, or?
Well, essentially, it's like just exploring new ways of storytelling. So we're creating a story that the person can interact with online.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the trend that I've seen with all these blue chip projects blowing up is they find, yeah, like they're extreme users, and they become the vehicle for referrals and the virality of everything. So I think if you targeted like who are the big players, that would give you the most leverage, you know, when you're doing Twitter spaces and you're finding those people to be in there and you're really building those relationships with people that'll take you around. I think that's like a strategy that I've seen work. The reason I ask what kind of metaverse stuff you're building is that I have some insight into some like other metaverse companies, and it sounds like some of the people that are in it are in their 30s to 40s, and they worked in visual effects or 3D for a long time, and they just want a new way to apply their skills. And maybe what you're looking for are like builders, and the builders bring, you know, that expertise, and they actually start using your thing or like, you know, proliferating it on the internet. So sometimes it's not the people you want to like make money from. Sometimes it's the people that just end up using the thing or like feel connected to it. I don't know if that helps.
Or the people who are going to get hyped and really like get behind it rather than just the overall. It's like you were saying, like instead of targeting the kids, you're targeting the parents who are going to actually buy the clothes. You're targeting like the adults that are going to.
Yeah, for me, Web3 is blockchain, but Web3 is also communities. So if you put all your users in a room and you looked at them and you're like, this is my community, maybe you could think about like what they look like, how would they interact, how are you gluing them together? Because that's what creates like long-term value, I think.
Have you spoken to your users or your potential users?
So we're like super early stage. We're not even done our MVP or anything, but like I've worked in the industry for many years, so I'm thinking of like the users as in like the people that I interact with who are interested in this space.
Okay, so what we do professionally is we actually recruit users and we put a prototype that's not coded in front of them. Of course, sometimes large companies need NDA, but depends on your situation. But you can actually test your concept and you'll get really solid feedback. So it's not like hitting or missing. You can actually validate your business model as well. So actually engaging with users early on is like what we're advocating, because otherwise you'll be spending a lot of money building it and then find out, oh, nobody wants to use this, and you're like stuck, right?
What we're actually doing is we're launching the product and then allowing the community to dictate the progress of how the project develops. So I guess like we could end up finding out that this is way outside of the demographic that we picked. It's just initially when designing things and it's like trying to narrow down. My kind of question was I've heard like how specific should I be when I'm kind of like trying to imagine.
Sometimes if you recruit the right users, after like 3 to 5 to 6 interviews, you start to see a pattern. They'll repeat the same things. For example, we did like a bunch of my interns, like we dived into NFTs last year, and then we found out, oh wow, gamers hate NFTs. Like we thought gamers would be the first community to adopt, but it's not. They hate NFTs because they have all these assets and now all the price got pumped up, right? So unless you really talk to users, you're not gonna guess what they think, right? Yeah.
Julian, did you have a question before?
How do you design, kind of considering there's a cultural side of accepting new tech while also making a better user experience on how that tech is used? Like back in the day, email wasn't particularly easy, more because it was just a new concept, similar to how wallets are now. So how can you get past just the concept itself is new
Maybe I should show one of the diagrams if we can just move back there. I think, okay, there's this concept of, have you seen this technology adoption life cycle, right? So depending on who you're targeting, if you're targeting innovators, right, it's people in this room, like we kind of speak tech, right? But if you're targeting early majority, you know, some people are more open to new things, like they will be the people who first switched to Gmail, like from Yahoo Mail, right? But there are people who are like late majority. So depending on who you're targeting, maybe at this stage, I think it's more the early adopters, right? But maybe 5 years, 10 years down the line, it's gonna shift, right? So I think even email changed over time, right? Before it was clunky and it was like Outlook, right? And then it went on web and cloud, right? So I think, you know, we're gonna shift with technology, and also the user experience is gonna get better and better afterwards also. So definitely at this stage, I think we're designing a little bit more for people who are early adopters. Yeah, and you have to plan your product ahead of time, I think.
I would add to consider and test many times your value prop and always go back to the pain point. You know, email is like, do you want a new internet writing tool sending over whatever tech you don't understand versus do you just want a quicker way to communicate? Or do you want a faster way to get from point A to point B? And I think by focusing on that, you know, Web3, I'm sure a lot of artists, when they got into NFTs, they weren't like, I want an NFT. They're more like, I can actually make money from doing the thing that I love. So I think if you focus on that, it creates a culture shift for people.
I wanted to first thank you all because I learned so much about UX and Web3 and all of that tonight. So coming from, I'm a fractional CFO myself, so super focused on the finance side of things. And having implemented so many ERP systems and like softwares in general, so I have gone through that pain. And like I wanted to ask you, am I wrong in my judgment that making a lot of these, especially finance software companies, don't really utilize a UX in their thinking and like I guess designing and making the products themselves? And if my judgment is kind of right, how can we encourage these companies to do so? Because the experience has been so painful. And it's not like smaller software companies, but like big name companies. So.
I actually have I've done a lot of finance related, like I designed Charles Schwab's site back in 1997, and also Quicken back in 2003, and also wealth management platforms, and also robo-advisors. So I think it depends on the type of designer you look for, because some designers are not interested in finance, right? They're like boring, right? But there are designers who are super interested in very complex problems like finance or even medical stuff. You know, we've also done some medical projects as well. So I think you need to find the right designers, and also designers who can communicate on a business level and communicate like, you know, financial level. Like you probably need a designer who understands like what is a stock, a bond. You know, some designers don't really care about that, right? So I think there exists, but I would say a lot of designers go into design because they love the craft. And also there's just not, I think there's not enough schools that pump, because in design school, I went to design school. We only, like my master's degree, we only have 14 people. You know, I think the entire US, maybe the UX community is not that big, like compared to the 150,000 jobs that are available right now on LinkedIn. There's just not enough people, right? That's why we're also training people as well. And I think there's a lot of career changers coming into our industry. So I have trained people who worked in Hong Kong, worked in the financial exchange, and then they became a UX designer, right? So people already with a finance background maybe can also communicate better and design for that space because they know it inside out and they know all the issues. Because especially in finance, if you work in a large corporation, you need to have the soft skills to convince a lot of people. You need to convince compliance. You need to convince like the tech people. You need to convince like the business guys, the marketing people. Like it's a lot of soft skills, right? Yeah, so it's just rare right now, I think.
In the hiring process, how would you tell, as like someone who's trying to hire a designer, how could you tell a good one for that? Because coding, like you can review GitHub, is very explicit, but design, there's many approaches. It's more creative. Like, how would you pick it?
I would say look at the portfolio. Like, look at if they've done similar industries before. Look at the portfolio. Like Alana said, like, look at how they think. You know, what's their work process? Like, do they just come up randomly with ideas or just flash you different styles, right? Or do they mention about, hey, talking to users, understanding competitors, you know, understanding your business requirements, technology constraints? Like, do they speak that way to you? I actually have these slides. If you guys want, you can send me an email, I'll send it to you. We came up with these slides. So the top part is the problem that you're having. Let's say if your programmers and your designers are fighting, you're actually missing a UI developer in the middle. Okay, let's say if like your product's not gaining traction and your investors don't feel like your product is the greatest, you probably have a strategy problem, right? And then it matches with the type of designers that you need. So yeah, you don't have to worry about taking photos. I can send it to you if you send me your email. So these are the UX design, but on top of that, there are other design skills like branding, web design, graphic design. These are all different industries. There are associations for graphic design, and it's different from UX design associations, right? So you just need to maybe educate yourself a little bit on the differences. And I agree, design is kind of like a little tough to navigate because people come from very, very different backgrounds, and we all use the word design, and it could mean 10,000 different things, right? So you just need to be aware of the differences.
So I'm super curious, like about Web3 design. Apparently, it's like we're trying to do something like, as you mentioned, for Web3, we're emphasizing more on personality and wondering like what else like we can embrace the Web3 concept like DJing or etc. I would love to hear like more. Cause I heard lots of like abstract concept, like I really want to see something like concrete or some like examples that you think is really interesting seeing Web3 designs.
Like in terms of products or?
In terms of like something more concrete.
Yeah. Well, I guess I talked a lot about values and all this like philosophical things, but I think DAOs are an interesting application of that. You have groups of people coming together from all over the globe. They may not even be vetted. You know, there's things like Friends with Benefits, which is like a giant social club. They're token gated. They work together. They create events together. They are a bunch of super high profile creatives in there just doing stuff. So I think it's really interesting to see, I guess, the gates lower for entry into these societies that will normally be gated through, you know, having work experience for like 20 years in a place, being a celebrity and only getting to a certain place. So I think socially there's interesting applications like DAOs. What if you could clarify the question, I could maybe think about more.
I'm curious about like, for example, how UX design apply to DAO or apply to like those Web3 concepts, like those I'll say organizations or
Yeah, so if you're a UX designer in a small company, chances are you'll have a chance to work on the roadmap. So you have opportunities to think of, you know, if your product is a wallet, for example, but you know that you want your wallet to stand out and you have a younger demographic and your demographic is also very chatty and they join a lot of communities, you could think about a social wallet experience and try to design for that, like an in-browser Chrome extension that's like, every time that someone checks their wallet, they can see other people also checking their wallet. So there's other ways to think about different user journeys within your product that is outside of it. I don't know, do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think UX can be applied to anything that makes technology user-friendlier. So UX is not just apps even, like your Tesla car is UX, right? Your massage chair is UX. Even smart homes, right, is UX. So I think UX can be applied everywhere that there's a friction in technology with the people using it. Yeah, so it can be, there are a lot of opportunities in this space as a UX designer, I think. Yeah, and then now with Web3 is, hey, maybe creative people like us, we can actually have ownership, like artists and musicians as well. And then maybe you get paid crypto, instead of paying through the bank. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities to explore. But we're in the very beginning, so I think all of us are learning also, right? Yeah.
Last question.
So either like Web3 or Web2 or otherwise, what's like the next big design philosophy or framework or principle that you think is really exciting?
I think the Web3 is making the internet go 3D. So Web2 was flat, right? 2D. So a lot of graphic design or visual designers are more their forte. But Web3 could be, maybe architects. Like I have architect students trying to get into the space. I'm like, you should work on the metaverse, right? Or industrial designers who are good at 3D stuff, they can now make digital assets that can be sold, right? So I think maybe the skill set might shift a little bit. And also with VR, AR coming along, and AI, right? So I think it's gonna shift, like how things shifted in Web 2, like from offline, people used to be typographers and then they became like web designers, and now we're kind of making another shift, right? So I think all of us still need to keep learning because it's gonna change. And then now with like AI, like you can just say a sentence and then it's gonna do the video like for you, or even like AI writing. Like a lot of tasks are gonna be automated, maybe. Maybe it will help us be more creative. Like we don't have to do the grunt work, but I think, skill sets are gonna move up the ladder as well. Like otherwise we'll be lighting candles, right? Yeah, so I think we will be allowed to be more and more creative when all the grunt work is gonna be taken over by robots. Yeah, like when I was in school, Photoshop was one layer. Like I would work all night and it would go, stick to the background. So, I mean, nowadays, like things changes so fast. Like even like Canvas, now like a secretary can do graphic design. Like 20 years ago when I built a website, like it cost me a few $1,000 US. Now with Wix, it's like, what, how much, $9.99 per month? So we're just all gonna move up the ladder, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple things. First one is brutalist websites. I like websites that look really messed up and disrespect grids, so that's one thing. The second thing is this idea of DAOs, but as a business model, like how a co-op works. I was listening to this YouTube talk from this guy working on this project called Meta Label, and talking about how there's gonna be this new emergence of, you could call them companies, but they're groups of people working towards a common purpose. And what does it look like with their profit sharing? What does it look like when you have all these groups out there with the talent and they're working on, making the world a better place, and they are not motivated by profit? Obviously, they still have to make money, but it's interesting to just see these new terms come out that feel a bit exciting. And related to that is like the power imbalances. What happens when the big tech companies don't own your data? What happens when you own your data and you can quickly move from platform to platform without worrying about your stuff being locked in a certain place? Like, does that make the internet more transient? Does that make it more exciting? Does it make it more dangerous? Because now, you have to manage all your keys and everything. So those are the things I'm excited about.
Thanks for the great questions, everybody. Can we get one more round of applause for the panelists? Thank you.
If you guys want the okay, here. Yeah. If you guys want the slides, I can send it to you if you scan the QR code. I wrote an article about why crypto would not gain mass adoption without good UX, and I have 10 points because I think a lot of the analogies are wrong in the Web3 space. So you can take a look.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. There might still be some pizza left. I don't know if there is. No pizza. Sorry. Plenty of drinks.